let's talk about a story that's so much more than just a piece of history. I mean, think of it as a blueprint for understanding what real power looks like. It's not about big battles or famous generals. It's about one single soldier and a journey that reveals a secret weapon, one that's way more effective than any bomb. This is the story of the man who ran to his enemy just to find freedom. I mean, just think about that for a second. It flips everything you think you know about war completely on its head. Prisoners are supposed to escape to get home, right? To get back to the fight. So what could possibly make a man do the exact opposite? What could he have seen deep in the heart of his enemy's country that made him risk absolutely everything just to stay there? To really get this story, we have to start at the end. An ending that didn't happen on some forgotten battlefield, but in a TV studio, a full 40 years after the war was supposed to be over. Okay, so picture this. It is 1985. The Cold War is still very much a thing, and on national television, a man that everyone knows as Dennis Wiles, a respected guy in his community, sits down and just confesses. He tells the entire world that his life, his name, his whole story, it's all been a lie. His real name? Georg Gärtner. And he was a fugitive. In fact, he was the very last German POW from World War II who had never been found. For 40 years, he lived right there, in plain sight. He built a life, he had a family, a career, all while basically being a ghost. But this just makes the mystery deeper, right? The war had been over for decades. Why keep hiding? And more importantly, why run in the first place? To find that answer, we've got to go back, way back to the deserts of North Africa in 1943. To understand Gärtner's choice, you have to see the world he came from, and then the America he discovered. And the gap between those two things, it wasn't just an ocean, it was a totally different reality. As a soldier in Rommel's famous Afrika Korps, Gärtner was fed this steady diet of propaganda about German invincibility. But the reality of the desert, well, it's a pretty brutal teacher. While they were being told they were the master race, they were literally rationing 1 single liter of water a day in that heat. Then they'd capture a British supply dump and find things like chocolate and rum, luxuries that told them the enemy had resources they couldn't even dream of. Their unstoppable war machine was leaving perfectly good tanks behind because they just ran out of gas. The whole myth was just crumbling around them. So after he was captured in Tunisia, Gärtner got his first real taste of America. And I mean that literally. In the transit camp, he was just floored watching American guards casually throw away half-eaten meals, food that would have been a feast for his entire unit. When he said something about it, a young guard just kind of shrugged and said this: "It wasn't meant to be cruel, it was something way more shocking, just casual, thoughtless abundance." And that was the first real psychological blow. This number represents a kind of power that Germany just couldn't wrap its head around. It's the number of Liberty ships America mass-produced during the war. The ship that Gärtner was brought to America on, it was just one of them, and it was built in an incredible 44 days. It was floating, undeniable proof of an industrial machine that could outbuild anything the Axis could ever hope to destroy. But the real transformation, the thing that really changed him, happened on a train ride. He was being moved from the coast inland to a POW camp. He expected a cattle car, right? Of course. Instead, they put him and the other prisoners on these comfortable Pullman coaches. They serve them hot meals on actual plates. And as the train is rolling through the country at night, he sees these little towns just blazing with electric lights, something that was totally unthinkable back in blacked-out Germany. He saw shipyard workers driving their own cars home. This wasn't a country crippled by war. This was a country that seemed untouched. Every single mile was another lesson in power. And this quote just perfectly captures what Gärtner was seeing. It was a culture of such incredible surplus that waste wasn't even a thought. Now, for a soldier from a country that was rationing every single scrap of metal, every drop of fuel, this wasn't just wealth. This felt like a strategic advantage so huge it was almost alien. So all of this slow-burning shock at American abundance, it was all building up to something. But it took one final personal blow to turn a German soldier into a man without a country, and to push him finally to the point of no return. In the summer of 45, the war in Europe is finally over. Gärtner and the other guys are all getting ready to be sent home. But then a letter shows up, a simple piece of paper from the Red Cross. It only had a few words, but those words were about to completely erase his past and rewrite his entire future. The letter told him that his hometown, Schwidnitz, wasn't in Germany anymore. In the big redrawing of Europe's maps after the war, it had been given to Poland, which was now under the thumb of the Soviet Union. Suddenly, he wasn't just a defeated soldier. He was a man with no home to go back to. Now, let's be clear. He wasn't afraid of going back to Germany. He was terrified of being sent to the Soviet-controlled zone. Word had gotten around the camps about things like Operation Keelhaul, where the Allies were forcibly sending Soviet citizens who'd fought for Germany back to Stalin, many of them to be executed or sent to the gulags. Gärtner knew that going home now meant being handed over to Stalin's secret police. For him, repatriation wasn't a trip home. It was a probable death sentence. So, faced with this impossible choice, certain danger in his old home, or a life on the run in this new world he'd come to admire, Gärtner made his decision. He was going to disappear. He wasn't going to escape out of America, he was going to escape into it. His escape from Camp Deming, New Mexico, was a thing of military precision. For weeks, he studied the schedule of the freight train that passed by the camp. So on the night of September 21st, 1945, while everyone else was distracted by a movie, he made his move. He slipped out, crawled under the wire fences, sprinted across the dark desert, and pulled himself onto a moving boxcar, vanishing into the American night. And what came next was just a masterclass in starting over. He became a migrant worker, then a ski instructor, and eventually a construction estimator. He built this whole new identity, Dennis Wiles, completely from scratch. He even became a quiet hero at one point, using his old Afrika Korps survival skills to help rescue people from a train trapped in a blizzard. His picture actually ended up in Life magazine, a fugitive hiding in plain sight. He fell in love, married a woman named Jean, raised her 2 kids as his own, and for decades never told him the truth. He had actually built the American dream, but it was all on a foundation of lies. Gärtner's story is absolutely incredible, but here's the thing. It's not just about one man's escape. His journey is a perfect window into a much bigger and often forgotten part of America's victory in World War II. These numbers right here, they show the 2 different worlds Gärtner was choosing between. Of the roughly 3 million German soldiers captured by the Soviets, about a third of them, 1 million men, died in captivity. Of the nearly 400,000 held by the United States, almost none died from mistreatment. That's not just a statistic, it's a profound statement about 2 totally different systems. And this number tells the rest of the story. Less than 1%. That is the percentage of all Axis POWs in America who even tried to escape. So why was it so low? Well, because for most of them, life inside the camp was safer and frankly more comfortable than their life on the front lines. They were fed, they were treated decently, the overwhelming urge to run just wasn't there. And this all boils down to a really crucial idea: soft power. It's the idea that a country's true influence doesn't just come from its military force, but from the appeal of its culture, its values, its way of life. Georg Gärtner's story might be the single greatest case study of soft power in the entire 20th century. America didn't have to convince him with propaganda. It convinced him with a hot meal and a Coca-Cola. You see, these American POW camps, they unintentionally became showrooms for the American way of life. The prisoners saw a country where regular people had rights, where there was opportunity, and where abundance was something you created, not conquered. Gärtner was an extreme example, sure. But thousands of other prisoners went back to Germany after the war and became huge champions for democracy, because they had seen with their own eyes that it worked. And that brings us to the real takeaway from this unbelievable story. Georg Gärtner wasn't defeated by an American bullet. He was conquered by American prosperity. He escaped from history itself and found a new life in a nation so abundant it could afford to just let him have a future. And his life forces all of us to ask a really fundamental question. What really makes a nation powerful? Is it the size of its army and its fancy weapons, or is it the strength, the appeal, and the promise of its way of life?